The investment we're working with our organization is going to be a 4 or 5 figure investment at the time of this recording, depending on the length of your service term and whether or not we decide it makes sense to implement one of our in-person flying experiences to help you get the best results. Obviously, that can be paid in one. We have payment plans available, and we technically have some relationships with some financing partners if that makes the most sense for you. And regardless of how your investment is structured, all fees paid will be eligible for our 100% refund policy, depending on the contingencies, of course. And I know you don't need justification for a 4 or 5 figure investment. I know you're not the type of person who would even consider investing into something that was the cheap option, because you're not necessarily looking to make an investment just to save a few dollars. You're looking to invest your capital in a way in which it multiplies and yields you a greater return than what you put in. But naturally, anytime the brain hears a number, it starts to seek logical justification for whether or not that investment makes sense, as it should. And so I'm not going to try to convince you as to whether or not you should invest with that organization. Instead, what I'm going to present to you is some of the decision-making frameworks that I've seen lead to fruitfulness in the lives of the people we've actually engaged with, as well as some of the decision-making frameworks that we've seen lead to failure. So whether or not you're still trying to make sense of the 4 or 5 figure investment, what you're going to learn in this video will help you with decision-making processes that align your decisions with how you invest everything God's given you with biblical scripture. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, decision-making frame actually comes from a story of 2 clients. One who was not the most successful and hasn't seen the best results, and another who saw absolutely rock star, stellar, dream level results even after engaging with us. I'm going to give fake names to both of these clients to protect their identities. So client 1 is our client who we'll call John. No offense if your name is John. This is the client who has not seen the best results. Client 2 is a client we'll call Mike. Mike has seen amazing results. And on paper, both John and Mike are very similar, and demographically, you might assume would have relatively similar chances of success. Now, both client John and client Mike were very intelligent individuals who loved Jesus, who spent time in scripture, who owned businesses, and both had personal take-home incomes of over 7 figures. But there is one key trait that has made the difference in their success levels. So we'll start with client John. And by the way, everything I'm about to share about client John, whose name is not really John, have been things that he has self-admitted to me. These have not been conclusions. These have not been deductions. These are things that client John has said to me himself. Client John originally started working with us in July of 2025, and from July through November, he lost 25 pounds. That's down 25 pounds in 4 months, which is great, which is significant, and some of the most amount of weight that he had ever lost before. The only problem is at the time of this recording, which is July 2026, John has been relatively plateaued. That means from November 2025 to July 2026, his weight hasn't really changed. And in one lens, this is an incredible victory. Number 1, he's lost 25 pounds. Number 2, he's been able to sustain this, to keep the weight off for 9 months after losing it, which he says himself is the longest he's ever been able to keep the weight off. And he says his life is completely changed because of that. And what I'm about to share is not at all to take away from that. That is an incredible victory. But the reality is John is not where he would like to be, or really where he needs to be just for his baseline health to be in the best position. John is not yet at that 15% body fat or sub 25 BMI mark. John still has some weight to lose. And one of the primary issues that John has communicated he's struggling with is this: an inability to properly assess the upside of doing what's required to reach his goal. I will say John is extremely humble, and he is willing to learn. He's continuing to show up and receive the coaching. And John comes to meetings with this confession. He says, Gabe, I need you to fix my brain on this. I'm having trouble justifying why it's worth doing what's required. And honestly, I'm kind of comfortable. I'm kind of complacent right here. And so this is something we're actively working on. But the problem John's facing, self-admittedly, is that he's underestimating the upside, and that makes it difficult for him to justify the consistency required to see the results he's going for. And to be straightforward, this can be a temptation when you start to see initial results. Because once you see initial results, you'll start feeling so much better than you did before. And you'll start looking so much better than you did before. There might be pain that's been there for years that is no longer there. You might no longer have that impending fear of some kind of health prognosis or something like that. You'll objectively feel the best you've ever felt in your body, even though you're not where you should be. When you get to that place of initial progress, it can be very tempting to become complacent. And that complacency is not going to be cured with a new level of fear on what happens if you don't change. Because honestly, that impetus of pain, it's not really the same anymore until the identity shifts and your standards raise. However, what needs to be in place at this point that we're actively working through with John and that you should be aware of before you get to this point is a proper assessment of the upside. Humans are notoriously good at assessing the downside, but notoriously horrible at assessing the upside, which is why most people don't invest into anything. They only look at the risk, but they forget to properly assess the value of the compound interest and the returns they'd yield by making said investments. But the people who can properly assess the upside, those people succeed massively. So that's what we're actively working through with John, and that can be a common temptation, especially when guys start to see initial results. Now, let's talk about client Mike, who's experiencing something very different. This is a text I got from client Mike over a year after he engaged with us directly. And client Mike is in the best shape of his life. He is beyond the body composition that's required for great health. He looks freaking jacked. He looks good. This is the type of client update picture that I receive and I'm like, dang it, I think that this guy might look better than me. He's got the separated delts, the biceps, the midsection, the abs, the chest. He is in the best shape of his life at 40 years old. And here's what I can say is the key difference psychographically in the way these clients think that has led to drastically different results. One person being relatively stuck for an extended period of time, the other person seeing the absolute best possible results and continuing to progress even after engaging with us. Client Mike properly assessed the upside return on this investment and everything that we were doing together. See, when client Mike came in, he did not come in just thinking about the fitness. He knew that the fitness was going to be part of the process. He knew he was going to look better. He knew he was going to feel better. He knew he was going to be stronger and literally healthier. But when client Mike came in, he understood that the most valuable upside return of investing into this process was what God was going to do in his heart through the process of stewarding his body. He recognized that the training of his discipline was going to transfer into other areas of life. He recognized that the consistency and routine was going to build trust with his wife in the home and set a good example for his children. He recognized that the peace he'd have and the certainty he'd have and how his results reinforced the identity God had given him of a disciplined man of God. He knew that was going to yield returns far greater than he could ever ask or imagine. And he came in with that mindset. And the beauty is that mindset has energized consistent results.
I'm not even as much concerned about I think having a goal is a good thing, but I just know like you've described, the confidence, the ability to, hold my head high and not feel like I'm hiding or, I'm crossing my arms over my stomach when I sit, that sort of, I've lived that life. I have the pictures to show what that guy looks like and the pictures from last summer. Like, to me, it is that level of confidence and discipline and commitment to doing the right things just like permeates all other facets of life. Again, after years and years and years, I've been playing guitar since I was 10 years old. I'm up on stage at church in the worship band last summer. And that's a thing now that I've held very close to my chest as something that's like a hobby and something that I love. And it was just like the boldness and confidence to now, take chances, be out in front. All of that to me is a manifestation. Again, it's probably of the identity, and the weight is just a piece of that, but it's the discipline, it's the commitment, it's all of those other things that then I feel like I've tasted what that looks like and I want that again. Yeah, I think I've tied so much self-worth to achievement, whether that's like sports or that's business or that's, academics growing up or whatever it was. Like, all of those things for me were just if I'm the best at this thing or if I'm the best at that thing, then I can feel okay with myself, because otherwise I know that like the internal me doesn't feel that. But there's like these external expressions of what that feels, what that is. And to me, that's, again, it's the health in the body, showing the discipline, all of that kind of stuff, lifting the weights.
Yeah.
I think the deeper thing is like you talked about, the identity piece of that
The
and
identity
how to
piece
get
of
that.
that.
Yeah, exactly. How to get that right so that in a setback, in something where I kind of have lost control or lost, you know, the ability to like help myself or
Yeah.
white knuckle my way through something. Willpower
Yeah.
only lasts so long.
Yeah.
It's like how do you kind of solve for when willpower runs out? I think that, yeah, I mean, just as I show up as a leader, right, in the business, an agency of 300 people, to me it's like I can't step into that without, I don't know, I feel like I need to solve this piece of it first so that I can show up the best as a leader. I think about my house and the kids that my age, the ages that my kids are right now. I've only got 10 years till they're both out of college. Like, time is ticking. I need to show up in the best way possible to form them into followers of Christ by
Mhm.
the time we send them off. Been married for 15 years. Like, we've gone through tons of ups and downs, but like, I feel like that identity self-worth holds me back from a level of intimacy with her where I can't show up, you know, because I felt she only knew who I felt I was inside. The fitness and the weight loss to me is an expression of, yeah, feeling that internal identity and locking in, and the resilience and the discipline and all those things are like byproducts.
Yeah.
I just want to figure out how to do that, not by short-term willpower and motivation, but by like a completely changed internal heart posture.
And so this is an ethic we absolutely need to take in just to considering this an investment, but also into the process that we're embarking on. We need to properly assess the upside return. The Bible says that Jesus endured the cross because of the joy set before him, not because of the pain in his past. So you're not going to be motivated by the moment or the pain that you're experiencing right now, or the disgust you have with your body right now. That might energize you in the short term to take that initial action, but what's going to energize you in the long term is the joy set before you. It's what God has for you through the process of stewarding your body well. So I highly consider taking that into your own personal prayer in between now and your conversation with us, and bringing that into consistent prayer through the process of engaging with us. The decision-making framework comes from Proverbs 4:7, which says, the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Although it costs all you have, get understanding. Contextually, that's written by King Solomon, who is King David's son and widely known as the wealthiest and wisest man in the history of the world, and also the king who's described as having arms of gold, a body polished like ivory decorated with lapis lazuli, which are rocks, gems that would have been describing his abs, and legs that are pillars of marble set on bases of pure gold. That is how King Solomon is described in Song of Solomon chapter 5. So there's an ethic the Bible teaches us about wisdom, which is that the first step of wisdom is literally to get wisdom, though it costs all you have to get understanding. And so what you're doing here is not just investing into some kind of babysitter or workouts or nutrition. You're investing into wisdom. We have the wisdom of having consulted 5,000 plus men since 2019. We've done the 20,000 plus hours. We've seen the years of the real lives of real Christian men actually play out. We're able to identify the patterns of thinking, the decisions, and the actions that lead to success and the ones that lead to failure. And the wisdom we'd impart onto you would compress the timeline and remove the risk of you having to learn those lessons yourself. So that's the decision-making frame that we've seen lead to fruitfulness when guys are considering investing their finances, their time, or even investing their vulnerability with someone. Proverbs 4:7, the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it costs all you have, get understanding. This decision-making frame is that we're called to multiply everything God's given us. And God has blessed you. He's blessed you abundantly. And one of the resources that he's blessed you with is capital. And he didn't just give you that capital so that you can pile it up and let it sit. There are specific things he's calling you to use that capital for, such as provide for your family, leave an inheritance to your children's children, to build the kingdom of God. He's even calling you to use that capital to enjoy the blessings that he has for you so that you can experience joy and peace here on earth for his glory. God calls you to invest that capital into acquiring wisdom, like we covered in Proverbs 4:7. And the cool thing is Jesus tells us specifically what happens when we're reluctant to invest and multiply what God's given us. In the parable of the talents, the master confronts the servant who refused to multiply what he had been given. He calls calls that servant wicked and lazy. The word wicked comes from the same root word as wicker furniture, which is something that is woven into itself, meaning the master described this servant as somebody who has evil woven into their very being. And so often as men, we think about multiplying our finances only through the lens of financial vehicles, like investing into our business or other investment vehicles. But finances are only one of the forms of wealth that God has given us. Finances can be multiplied by investing into our marriages, whether that's investing into wisdom that brings peace, or trips with your wife that bring joy and yield a profitable return in the peace and joy that's in your marriage and the memories that you guys get to tell. We can multiply finances through investing into our home and providing a safe and peaceful environment for our families, or investing into children's sports, which multiplies our finances through the profitable lessons that our children learn as they're training for those sports. In these cases, even though there's not a profitable dollar return on your investment, you're still multiplying those finances through what you gain in return of that investment. And that is absolutely encased when you invest the capital that God's given you into acquiring wisdom. Proverbs 18:11 actually teaches us that wisdom is more valuable than financial resources. Proverbs 8:11 says, "For wisdom is far more valuable than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with it." As Christian men, we're absolutely called to build wealth. We're called to leave an inheritance to our children's children, but God calls us to multiply those financial resources in many other ways. And just to take this a layer deeper, let's think about multiplying those financial resources through investing in our health. Health in itself is a form of wealth because wealth is ultimately access to resource that can be invested and multiplied to yield profitable return. And not having access to health and fitness, not having access to the energy, not having access to the confidence in who God made you to be, not having access to the freedom to be present with your family, not having access to the ability to demonstrate discipline to everyone who looks to you as a leader. That would not be a profitable return. So the second decision-making frame is that we're absolutely called to multiply everything God's given us, and investing into our health is one of the ways to do so. Now, and last but not least, one of the decision-making frames that I've seen that leads to failure for some people is when they neglect to count the cost. This is a lesson that Jesus teaches us in Luke chapter 14, where he tells us that if we're planning on building a tower, we should first count the cost. And this isn't just an accounting lesson or a construction planning lesson. This is a lesson on the ethic of objectively assessing the cost of what we're called to steward. And so I want to make sure we're doing that here today. I want to make sure we're accurately assessing the cost of not making this investment, and not even just an investment into engaging with our organization, but making the necessary changes, period. When most people consider the cost of not making the necessary changes, they immediately think health. And yeah, that is an absolutely real cost. And I'm not talking about the potential medical bills that can rack up, or how a lack of health can pull you from business. But I'm more accurately talking about the cost of how poor health can truly impact you and your family. For example, most people don't consider the real cost that if you're not stewarding your body well, you could die early. That's an absolute reality that exists. It seems like you'll just keep on living forever and you can keep on going in this inconsistency until the day that your family is standing there staring at your cold, dead body, wishing that you had made the changes earlier. And I don't say that to be graphic. I say that because that is the utter reality of what could take place if you don't make the necessary changes. That is exactly what happened to me. I remember getting a call from my 18-year-old little brother on a Saturday morning that my father passed away at 55 of diabetes. I pick up the phone at 7 a.m. I immediately knew something was wrong. And I hear my little brother's voice crack across the phone saying, "Gabe, Dad's gone." He had just spent the last 45 minutes attempting to resuscitate him via CPR in front of my mother. And by the time blood was coming out of his mouth, he realized my dad had passed. Again, I don't share that to be graphic. I share that because I would hate for your family to find out the reality of the pain of that situation by having to experience it themselves. I know it might feel like I'm poking a little bit, but I would way rather poke you and bring out some pain here right now than you have to experience the pain that's associated with you not making the necessary changes. I promise you that level of pain hurts infinitely more than any potential pain you think might be associated with the process of stewarding your body well. Like I said, this is all fun and games. This is all not that big a deal until your family is standing over your cold, dead body wishing that you made different choices. That is the objective reality cost that we need to be willing to count based on where you decide to invest your time, your finances, and your attention after watching this video. By the way, if you continue reading that passage from Luke, you see that Jesus asks us to count the cost specifically so that if we inaccurately assess the cost, we don't look like fools. And so this is not just because of the sadness. This is because the reality is when your family looks at you and wonders why you didn't make the necessary changes, they're going to question the wisdom that you had. I say that as a brother out of love. And again, whether you are facing that immediately right now, or you're scared that may be a risk down the road if nothing changes, or you have absolutely no fear of ever facing a health prognosis like this, we need to count the cost of not making the necessary changes. Because for a lot of you watching this right now, that impending health prognosis is not an immediate concern, and it may never be. You might already be at a healthy body weight. You might have the confidence that you can maintain a healthy body weight. And you might be wondering, what's the cost of not going from kind of okay to ripped to 15% body fat? And the reality is the biggest cost is not one that you might have to pay down the road. It's the cost that you're incurring right now. It's the cost of living out of alignment with how God is calling you to live. It's the cost of having lower standards than you know God is calling you to have. It's the cost of your children having to observe the inconsistency and the lack of congruency between who you say you are and the story that your body and your habits tell. That is a cost that has already been racked up and is actively being paid right now as we watch this video. And that is a cost that goes beyond just impacting you, but it also impacts your children. And not just because they can potentially pick up on your habits and replicate those themselves and have to go through all the pain, if not worse, that you've already experienced because of the poor physical stewardship of your body, but because of the frustration that occurs if they look at you and take that as a bad example and now live their lives differently because of the way they watched you live. Those are costs that are actively building up. Those are the costs that eat at you while you lie awake at night. Those are the costs that create the cognitive dissonance, that create the shame, and they are absolutely not worth paying. So the people who I really see succeed, they truly and accurately count the costs of not doing what's necessary. And that's it. I hope that this video blesses you, hope that it edifies you, and we'll see you in the next one.